Welcome to Hustle and Flow with Heather Hubbard, episode 120. Hi, I'm Heather Hubbard, and I was a litigator, partner, and practice group leader at an AmLaw 200 firm. I know what it takes to rise to the top. I also know all too well the toll it can take on your personal life. So how do you shine bright without burning out? How do you embrace your ambition without selling your soul? You're listening to the Hustle and Flow podcast. Welcome back. I am your host, Heather Hubbard. Thank you so much for joining me. If you have not already, please take a moment. Just hit pause. I want you to go and leave a rating or review for the podcast on iTunes or whatever podcast app you listen on. Oftentimes people ask me, how can I support your work? You do such great work. Thanks for showing up and giving us so much free and valuable content. The way that you can help me is to leave a rating, leave a review on iTunes or your favorite podcast app. It truly does make a difference, and I really appreciate it. So if you've not done that already, hit pause, go do it, and then come back. All right, today's episode is inspired by a listener that I got to meet in DC at GalCon. And she shared with me that she was using the Life and Law Planner, and not just using the planner, but using the system that goes along with the planner. And she said, it's working. I'm following the system and it is working. I am starting to achieve my goals and move forward towards what I want. And I said, that's awesome. What do you want me to address on the podcast? What's the problem? And she said, I'm really anxious and stressed out about the thought of actually meeting my goals. And I said, yes, I love this. Such a great topic, because it comes up for all of us, but we generally don't think of it like that. It is literally the same coin. It is just different sides. When we talk about fear, oftentimes we think of it in terms of fear of failure. We don't think of it in terms of fear of success. But many of us experience fear regardless of whether we're failing or succeeding, because it is the same coin. It is the same issue. It's just a little bit more nuanced. So I love, number one, that you are using the planner and you are using the system and it is working. It works if you work it. So congratulations for actually doing that and getting closer to your goals. But thank you for sharing that you're a little bit stressed and anxious about reaching those goals, because it is such a great topic and it's perfectly normal. Sometimes we think maybe there's something wrong with us when we're afraid of success. We say we want certain things, and then when they start to come to fruition, we freeze up. That is perfectly normal. And hopefully you're already starting to relate to this, associate with this. If not, let me just give you a few more examples of how this might show up in your life, because you may be thinking, I don't know that I have fear of success. Sometimes we mull over emails to send. I see this in my masterminds all the time. It's often a topic of discussion. You want to send out an email to someone to maybe ask for their business, or to ask for an opportunity, to ask to be able to speak, to write an article, to receive a promotion, or to serve on a committee, whatever it is. You're asking someone to do something that opens up the door of rejection. And as soon as there is the potential for someone to say no, or to ignore you, you get fear and anxiety around that, right? This is the fear of failure, the fear of rejection. And so a lot of times people spend a lot of time really mulling over, am I saying this the right way? Should I push send, right? We just have a lot of anxiety around that. And then we send it out. And let's say you get a response. And the response is, that sounds great. I'd love to hear more. Or that sounds great. Will you send me a proposal? Or that sounds great. When can we talk about this? Or that sounds great. I would love for you to do that. I would like to hire you. I would like for you to lead the committee. And sometimes maybe your reaction is sheer excitement. You are all in, you're ready to go. But oftentimes, we then freeze up and we're like, oh God, now what? We get really scared. We're like, oh my gosh, well, now I actually have to come up with a proposal. Now I actually have to reach out again. I have to respond. I have to say something, and I am speechless. I have nothing to say. How do I even respond to this person? And to some extent, it might be, imposter syndrome, right? Like you got someone to say yes, and maybe in some way you feel like you duped them because you're not sure you're good enough, and now you're going to have to perform. But oftentimes, it's a different issue. And that's the issue that I want to talk about today. And it is this concept of pushing up against what we call your upper limit. I first learned of this concept in the book, The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. And just a little side note, I know when a book is blowing my mind by my need for naps. This may sound really odd. When I was training for a half marathon, if you don't know this story, you can go all the way back to episode 1. Training for a half marathon, anytime I would go an extra mile that I had never done before, when I would come home, I would sleep for a few hours. My body, my mind needed a break. The very next week I could go out and do that same run and it didn't need it again. But as soon as I did one more mile, I needed that nap. It was as if I was truly expanding or growing in a way that my body needed to expand into. And when I read books that I know are life-changing for me, I will read a chapter or two and I have to take a nap. And I'm not even joking. I cannot function. I have to stop what I'm doing and take a nap. And I genuinely believe it's this same concept that if I'm having to take a nap between chapters, it's because there is something that my body is needing to absorb as it's expanding. And for me, and we're all different, right? And we all get things at different times in our lives. What resonates at one point may not at another. But for me, when I read The Big Leap, I had to take a nap between, I swear, every single chapter. And I knew this was huge for me because of that. I knew I was on to something that was going to change my life forever because of the amount of naps I was taking. I have no idea if anyone else does this. I feel a little bit vulnerable sharing that. It sounds a little weird, but there you go. All right. So Gay Hendricks in The Big Leap talks about this concept that once we push up against some new level of success, once we push up against a new level of happiness, our body, our mind immediately says, this does not feel comfortable. This does not seem normal. Something else bad is about to happen. And because of that, we start to have really negative thoughts, or we start to pick fights with people. We start to self-sabotage. We don't even realize that we're doing it. But there's this fear that subconsciously, if we are doing well, then something else is going to happen that we don't like some kind of sacrifice. This came up as well in Brené Brown's speech on Netflix. If you've not seen her Netflix special that came out within the last month, definitely go check it out. It's really, really good. It's basically a summary of Braving the Wilderness. And if you've read the book, still go listen to the special. It's a great refresher. And if you're not familiar with it, it's a great introduction to Brené and her work. But she tells the story of how when she got to be on Oprah for the first time, she had so much anxiety. But the anxiety was not around being on Oprah. The anxiety, if she was being really honest, was this fear that she's probably going to die in a crash on the way home. Because you can't go to Oprah. You can't experience something that amazing without there being some kind of negative consequence to it. And so she tells this whole bit around that fear, but she talks about it in the sense that there is this vulnerability involved in being joyful and embracing joyful moments, because as adults, we're a little bit scared of this concept of fully embracing joy without that fear of balancing us out so that we then don't get disappointed for whatever bad thing is about to happen, the shoe that's going to drop. It's almost like this sense of showing up as a kid again, of being like maybe a bit naive, or that's what our brain tells us, because we're showing up with such glee, such excitement, right? When we see kids get so excited about things, we love it. It makes us smile. We video it. We put it on YouTube. We share it on social media. And when adults show up that way, we're like, what is going on? We don't really accept that culturally for someone to have that same level of excitement. Maybe if it's like the birth of a child or something like that. But when it's your own stuff, your own success, that's generally not acceptable. So to show up and be so excited, to be so joyful, to be unafraid, to say maybe nothing's bad is going to happen. Like, I'm just going to fully step into this moment. I'm going to fully say, this is possible. This is possible. And even more good things are going to come from this. And I'm going to fully express that excitement and fully express that joy, regardless of what the other adults around me think. It's a very scary and vulnerable proposition. Now, Gay, he talks about it a little bit differently. He's got a little bit of a different spin on it. And his is related more to neuroscience, which is when we start to expand, like maybe it is you're getting more attention. Well, if you're getting more attention, he goes back to kind of the way that our primal brains work, which is the concept that if you're going to get more attention, then you are going to be more likely to be the one who is captured and killed. Another was if you get, we would say this in Kentucky, I'm pretty sure Gay did not say this in his book, if you get a little too big for your britches, you might be ostracized. You might be pushed outside of your group, of your tribe. And there we want to belong, right? So that tends to make us sometimes play smaller so that we can fit in. And then he also talks about this concept that if we're happy, if we're just, out enjoying the sun and the breeze and the flowers, we're going to let down our guard and the lion is going to get us. So Gay says we're naturally wired to want to play small, but we're also naturally wired to want to play big. And so we have to really expand into that space. And anytime you are achieving more success or you are achieving more happiness, it is what he calls your upper limit. And your upper limit is going to change over time, right? Each time you hit a new level, you expand it into the next, which is really the same concept that I was talking about with the naps when I was referring to training for the half marathon or even reading The Big Leap. Now, Gay goes on to explain that this is not just primal fears. They might actually be legitimate. He then gives examples of how this really can play out the way you might expect in real life. And here's what that looks like. Sometimes when you push yourself outside your comfort zone, when you start to achieve new levels of success, others may not feel comfortable with those changes. Others may not feel comfortable with you reaching your goals. Others may not feel comfortable with you reaching your goals as fast as you are. Others may not feel comfortable with the goals that you have set to begin with. Others may not feel comfortable with the way that you have maybe changed in order to focus on and reach your goals, because maybe you're saying no to more things. People just don't feel comfortable with others who make them question their own lives and their own decisions. And much like the primal brain, this too is subconscious. Often people don't realize that it's their own stories, that it's their own stuff that is making them frustrated with someone else. It really is subconscious fear. So what do you do with that, right? Because I would love to tell you that if you just work the planning system and you just reach your goals and you just have a good and positive attitude, everything will go well. But it may not. As you expand, you may experience some failure. As you expand, you may experience maybe even family and friends pushing back. Maybe colleagues, maybe even supervisors. Gay gives us an example that sometimes as people achieve more success and they get more focused on that, you might start to hear comments like, oh, well, I know you don't have time for me, or, oh, you've forgotten where you came from, or it must be nice. Shonda Rhimes, she talks a little bit about this as well in her book, Year of Yes, with this concept that as you change, right? And this isn't always celebrity status, right? But as you change, as you get more focused on your goals and achieving your goals, you might start to hear this negative feedback. You might not, I'm putting in quotes, belong anymore to the tribes around you. And that can be really unsettling. And so in that sense, and Gay doesn't really have this in his book, but I think kind of the way I approach it is, this is in my life and law blueprint. I think we have to own our decisions. We need to come from an empowered place. You get to choose. You get to choose. Everything is a choice. So do you want others around you to feel comfortable? Do you want to belong to your current tribe? Or do you really want to go after your goals and achieve your dreams? And I'm not saying it's either or, but it might be. And if it is, which do you want? And when you make the decision, it allows you to release the other. And we often outgrow the people we're with. And I, have experienced this many times in my life. And people are going to talk about you. People are going to say things. And you can either stay focused on that, or you can know what your heart and soul is calling for and move towards that. It's when you try to do both that it creates a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety, because it's really hard to marry the two. It's really hard to do both at the same time. I'll say this as well. You've probably heard before that you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And so sometimes you're growing at a faster pace than those around you. And sometimes we're afraid of not spending as much time with certain people. And there's this fear that we're leaving them behind, right? Or that we're getting a little too big for our britches. But if you stay around the same people who are not progressing at the rate as you're going to play small, and they're going to hold you back. And you're probably going to get resentful and bitter. And that's not really showing up as a good friend either. So if you start to find yourself around people who complain a lot, if you find yourself around people who are always looking for what's going to go wrong, if you're always around people who are saying, are you sure you should do that? Or, I'm not sure that's a safe option. You should do this instead. Anytime you have people mirroring their own fears to you, and you listen and you accept it, you are going to continue to be filled with stress and anxiety. But when you start to maybe even adjust your environment, when you start to say, well, what if I started spending more time with people who are at my new level, or who have the same desires to go after what they really want, would things change? And I'll just go ahead and tell you the answer to that is yes. If you now find the group of people that can mirror their own, right? They're going to mirror to you their own can-do attitude, their problem-solving attitude, their, I'm going to push the boundaries, I'm going to go big, I'm going to go for what I want. You will experience less stress and anxiety because they are supporting you and they are encouraging you, as opposed to trying to hold you back. And again, it's often subconscious. They are not intentionally trying to hold you back. Now, maybe some people are, but most are not. It's just about where they are. And so having the courage to constantly check in to determine whether or not you are spending time with the right people, that's going to help you stay in a place where you're not stressed out or anxious. And this is why I'm always telling people you need a mastermind. And I often am changing the masterminds that I'm in because I tend to outgrow sometimes the group I'm with. And that may sound really egotistical, but I'm an all-in kind of girl. I am very competitive and results oriented. That brings me joy. It is just who I am, and I love it. So what that means is I often make wonderful contacts and love who I'm around. But by the end of our 6 months or 12 months together, I now need another group. And you may be the same way. So you've got to constantly check in and say, am I around the group that I need to continue to support me? And if you are constantly aligning and up-leveling who you are spending time with such that they are 100% supporting you, encouraging you, giving you great ideas, you're going to find that it's not as stressful or anxious to actually go after the goals that you have because those around you are doing it as well. And it doesn't seem odd or scary. And speaking of taking ownership, this is part of why we have the fear to begin with. I personally think that it's so easy to stay where you are, to never go after your goals or your hopes or your dreams, because you can say things like, well, I just don't have the time. If my clients weren't so demanding, if my spouse or my kids weren't so demanding, if my boss was not so demanding, if the legal industry was not so demanding, then I could do what I want. It's so easy. It's so easy to blame others. It's so easy to blame our situation on the fact that we can't go after our goals. So when we find a planning system that works and we start taking steps and actions towards making it a reality, suddenly there's nothing to blame if things don't work out. There's no one to point our finger to or a situation to point our finger to say, well, that's the reason why I couldn't do X. It's now all on us. We are empowered. We have taken responsibility. It's on us whether or not we achieve that. And that's a scary proposition. It's so much easier to blame others for where we are in life. And so when you decide that you are going to take ownership, it can be a little scary. So one of the things that you can do to reduce stress and anxiety when that's kind of the issue, when that's coming up, is to really do visualizations and affirmations. So I've been teaching this since I started this company. We did it in Goals Reimagined way back in 2015 when we first got started. And I still have you guys do vision boards and things like that. And the reason why is because it's a reminder as to what you really want. So when we start to have those fears of, I have no one to blame but myself, and we're worried that maybe we're going to fail and we'd rather play it safe. If we go to the visualization of what achieving the larger goals, of achieving the vision, what that looks like and what that feels like, it motivates us to keep going. It motivates us to say, you know what, it's worth trying. Because I would rather risk not getting to the vision than to risk playing small or staying at the same place because I was afraid. The visualizations and affirmations can also help you calm down. I'll give you an example of that in a minute, as well as give you ideas on what to do next. So I think I had mentioned earlier, you get the email back or someone says, you've got the job or you can do the proposal, and then you kind of freeze. When you can visualize yourself having already achieved the goal, when you can visualize the vision you have for yourself, then you can step into that vision and make decisions in the present moment based on that future. So if you are already in the vision where you want to be, you can ask yourself, well, what would I be doing at that point? One of my early coaches, he often would say, if you want $1 million company or a $10 million company, you need to look at what you're doing now and say, well, is that what $1 million owner would do? Or is that what a $10 million owner would do? And in some ways, of course not, because they probably have access to more money or whatever else. But if in your mind that person looks and acts a different way, they didn't just wake up one day and change. They were taking actions all along the way that got them there. So you can let that future CEO give you advice now as to what to do. And that's really what I try to do when I'm making even decisions in my company or when I feel out of alignment and I'm trying to figure out what's going on. I go to my vision board and I just sit there with it and I let the feeling of accomplishing that vision, of being in that place, take over my entire being so that I can make decisions in the present based on what I know I really want because it's within us. In fact, it reminds me of another book. If you've not read it already, it's called Alter Ego by Todd Herman. He's honestly the guy responsible for the business as you know it. He's the one that had me rebrand. And yeah. So anyway, I think a lot of Todd and his book, his concept, he's a peak performance coach. He works with a lot of athletes and Olympians, is that if you cannot identify with your future version of yourself, right, through your vision board, then you just adopt someone else. You can create it from scratch or you can choose someone. And I actually did this not too long ago. So, when you talk about, you're achieving your goals, you're getting closer and it's stressing you out. I have decided I really want to be a better speaker. And there are certain talks that I really want to be giving that they have been ideas in my mind for a while and I'm just too scared to go do them. And I want to address that fear. So I decided, well, I'm just going to go back and do some beginner speech courses, training. And so while I was at this workshop, I was so nervous. It was crazy. I think part of it was because it was such a small group and I would rather perform in front of 1,000 people than 10 people. But I was shaking. And after this one performance in this really small breakout, the guy who teaches it said, I'm going to take you up to the stage when we all get back together to do some laser coaching. I was like, oh my gosh. And so I was really nervous, right? I was really anxious. This is your exact point when you asked me this question. I am getting closer to my goal, right? I am getting the feedback I need. I am getting a stage to get feedback in front of others. And yet all the nervous energy, I generally don't get nervous when I speak, right? But that's not what the point was. The point was I'm getting closer to my goals. It's this fear of, oh my gosh, what does this mean? If he has picked me out to really help me, it's going to force me to go bigger. And so I was trying to actually envision my future vision self that's on stages, really big stages, giving very big keynotes. And it wasn't working. So I was like, okay, well, who else can I embody to calm down and stay focused and really move towards these goals? And so I said, okay, Beyonce. I love Beyonce. But then I was really struggling too. I couldn't envision myself being Beyonce because quite frankly, she's just so amazing. And there was too big of a gap. And so I wasn't believing it. And that's whether it's with visualizations or affirmations, that's the key. You've got to believe it. And so then I was like, well, who else do I really love that's a performer that I can embody? And so then I thought of Taylor Swift and I was able to do that. Now, I get Taylor Swift is amazing too, okay? But for whatever reason, I was able to embody her and not Beyonce. And I think that's just because, look, Taylor Swift ain't Beyonce, right? Beyonce is just on a whole other level. So I was able to tap into that. And as soon as I did that, my body changed, my emotions changed, everything just changed. I was lighter. And I very much felt like I was a performer and I was just there to make the audience happy, even though that audience wasn't there really to see me speak. And so I got up on stage and I had zero nerves. I'm getting feedback. I had zero nerves. As he's giving me advice, I'm able to be present and hear it. So that's another tip for you. If you're starting to feel anxious and nervous about achieving your goals, if there is something in particular you're worried about, right, related to that goal, such as getting a proposal or a client or a job, I want you to find someone that you really look up to and you admire and see if you can't make that connection. See if you can't step into that person and act as if you were them, because that might also help calm you down and let you move forward. Or you may be able to actually step into that vision board at that moment. A lot of times I can, and go from that place. So great question. Thank you so much for bringing it up. It's such an important topic. And thank you for using the planner and letting me know that it's working for you. So I'm so excited that you are starting to reach your goals, and I cannot wait to see what happens for you. And definitely, you know who you are. Definitely keep me posted. And I believe I'll be seeing you at Life and Law Live in November. So keep up the good work. Everyone out there, up-leveling. It feels uncomfortable. You might need to take a nap, but it is so worth it to keep going after your goals and your dreams and to stick with your planning system so that you can become the person you really want to be. That's it for this week. I'll see you on the next episode. I am super excited to announce that the Life and Law Planner is officially here. It is more than just a calendar. It is a full planning system. If you want to take back your days, your weeks, your months, and your year, order your planner now. It will completely change your life and help you accomplish your biggest goals. There's only a limited quantity available, so go to lifeandlawplanner.com and order yours today.